Aloha, everyone. Aloha. That word is a very positive word. You give aloha to someone when they come to visit. Hawaii has long had a reputation for welcoming outsiders, sometimes to their detriment. And so Hawaii has a history of colonization, of annexation, of oppression, and a lot of the Hawaiians died. 90% of them were dying in the 1800s. So everybody knew somebody who was dying. And that has had a big impact on the people there. And I'm not just talking about Hawaiians, but all the immigrants who came, starting with the Japanese imported labor, the Chinese who followed, the Filipinos, and the Portuguese who were the Luna, who were the overseers on the plantation. So it's out of this plantation economy that the culture of Hawaii has evolved. And so if sometimes you hear the word local, if you're in Hawaii, somebody's a local. What does that mean to be a local? Well, newspaper people and people in the media don't use that word anymore, local, in a crime story, for example, describing somebody as a local male. They say, we're not going to use that anymore. Well, what does it mean to look local? Okay, it means you don't look like me. Okay, I'm a haole. What is a haole? A haole is somebody who came from the outside. It's come to mean something derogatory, as in an effin' haole. And the effin' haules are the ones who were aggressive, New York style maybe, who came and tried to tell people in Hawaii how to do things. And there's some resentment about that. But then there's also local haules. So I'm a local haole, meaning I've been there a long time and have some understanding of the culture. And so that's usually a positive, considered positive to be a local haole. So it's within that context that I want to give you my presentation so you have some understanding. So Dina's put me under bicultural, and so I started to think about that over lunch. What does it mean to be bicultural in Hawaii? Well, maybe in this context today, it's about the outsiders and the locals. So let me start with my first one here. Yes? Okay. In November of 2011, it was the Association of Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit in Hawaii. It's a big deal. Obama comes. There's dignitaries from all over Asia Pacific area who come and talk trade. There was an incident that happened. I don't know if you heard about this. It did not get much national coverage. A federal agent was in Waikiki at a McDonald's, and he shot and killed a local male, although it's not represented that way in the story. So what I did with this story, I thought, this is a big story. I can tell right now how this is going to be interpreted by readers. What is the narrative? What key words in this story and sources that are used are going to trigger another narrative that's not written about in the media, which is the culture clash narrative, which is not covered. So I started collecting all these stories. And so for an exercise, I decided to give my students 2 of these stories so that they could see how a story changes over time as the facts are revealed, but also depending on the word choice by the reporters to construct the identity of the shooter and the victim, and also the sources that are chosen. So it's a fascinating story. The trial is starting in July. So if you Google Chris Dede, who is a federal agent, came out from Washington, part of Apex Security, and then the victim, Colin Elders, who actually lived in my neighborhood. Some of my students know him. This is a very small community. So when you start to talk to people, you find out things. You kind of have to watch your step in class, because you don't know who's related to who, a small town, small kind town. All right, let me show you this. So you see some of these words in the story. He's a federal agent from the mainland being the continental U.S., which in itself evokes a power relationship. The mainland. There's a lot of people now in Hawaii who are using the word continent instead, especially Hawaiians, because Hawaii was illegally overthrown, and Clinton apologized for that. So they're trying to get beyond that. Also, Colin Elders was a Kalaheo High graduate. If you're in Hawaii, you ask somebody, what high school did you graduate from? Everybody asks that when you first meet somebody, because that is your identity. So this guy was a football player from Kalaheo. There's nothing ever said about his job. So there's certain key descriptors that will immediately trigger, when it did, among readers. Local guy versus outsider. This guy comes from the mainland, he's got a gun. We are not a big gun culture in Hawaii, although that has really increased this year. So he thinks he can just go and use his gun, you know, and kill this local guy. So people were very upset about it. So I took this story, let's see. Where's the guy? There we go. Hawai'i, do you see this quote down here? The expletive, and I can tell you what word that was. Hawai'i went kill Colin. So that was a reaction from a friend of Colin Elder's. He was a good kid. So you see how the identity is being built up in the first story. The federal agent is the aggressor. This local Hawaiian guy gets killed. Okay. It goes on, then we find out, more information comes out, he had drugs in his system, and then we get to the agent being labeled the aggressor, and then the last story, that he was compelled to shoot. Ken Kobayashi, a very good reporter, got all this information from the surveillance video, which was the play-by-play, which incidentally, a judge, Karen Ahn, who used to be a reporter, sealed the video. And the news media applied for, to get that open and unsealed. It's very different from the Trey Martin case. This information was shut down right after it happened. The cops shut it all down, probably because Senator Inouye, senior senator, recently died. This APEC conference, we got to keep this quiet. We can't have all this attention on Hawaii, so shut it down. So very little information was available to the media. So I want to tell you then about the exercise. I could get this to move. And you could do something like this in your own community. So the students could see how the words that reporters use, including themselves. I do this in a senior class. It's a 6-credit-hour media and community capstone class in which the students are doing reporting in their community, but I'm also giving them the cultural context so they can understand who are they, where are they coming from, what are the words they are using in their stories, and what kinds of sources are they choosing and why within their own cultural experience. About a quarter of my students come from the mainland, the rest of them are local. So look for key words, as I did, their mainland, federal agent, who's from Virginia, then use the I'm vain for these sources. Why am I having trouble getting, okay. So these are the 2 stories I used. I used story 1 and story 4, so over time, the students could get a sense of the change. Okay, here's some of the key words. He was educated. This is story 1. He was the alleged killer, off-duty agent. And they did, the reporters did, actually there were 4 reporters on the first story, some of their top people. They also interviewed a security agent, officer on site. But none of the other witnesses are interviewed who were there at McDonald's. It's very interesting, there's very little information. And here's the victim. Interestingly, the deputy prosecutor wanted the surveillance video sealed. The prosecutor didn't want the information public about what happened in McDonald's. By story 4, this is 7 months later, Dee Dee was compelled to shoot. We start getting the information, which those of us who live there kind of figured out what happened. Local guys on drugs in Waikiki messing with tourists, which they do. Got into a fight. Apparently, according to the defense lawyer, Dee Dee felt he was protecting other people at McDonald's who were being harassed. One of them, a local Hawai'i who was punched, and then he said, hey, I'm local, don't bother me, you know, go bother somebody else. I'm a local Hawai'i. So then he goes off and to bother somebody else, you know, says to Dee Dee, why are you guys looking so serious, standing in line at McDonald's? So who knows? We got to find out in the trial that's coming up. And then the students, I summarized some of the student comments. Exactly, you know, and this is what the students took from the readers. Massey case again, which is a case from 1932 in which a Hawaiian man was killed and the white people got off with a day in the governor's office. So that identified them. They think of us as savages in grass huts. This agent must do time. By story 4, everybody wanted the facts. All the readers were begging for the facts. Now this narrative was not being told by the reporters. This is another story that was being written by readers. So this is what I want my students to get from this, that the story changes over time as limited facts emerge, and the culture clash theme, however, was still there, even though the facts of the case became more prominent, and that's what readers wanted to find out. Come on, it's changing. Nope. So what I've given you is a handout that has 2 of the stories, if you're interested in reading about this case, as well as how I did the exercise. And if you have any questions, please come up and ask me, but you can do this in your own classes. You could do this in an intro class too. Take some stories and see how people are framing it. It could be really in any community. Every community is unique. It just so happens that Hawaii is a very kind of complex place. And it's basically locals versus outsiders is the common narrative. The exciting thing that's happening in Hawaii is for the first time in 80 years, we have a new generation of people who are fluent in Hawaiian. We had a Hawaiian Renaissance in the 1970s with the reemergence of hula and men doing hula as well, starting that, and a lot of the Hawaiian traditions came back, and Hawaiian immersion schools started in the 1980s. So now we have people coming out with doctorates fluent in Hawaiian, translating newspapers from the 1800s and making all that information accessible. So one of the things that I'm really interested in, and I'm having talks with some people who are Hawaiian editors in Hawaii, is how do we incorporate Hawaiian values into journalism? Journalism is an important institution. It represents oppression. So Hawaiians don't really read our daily papers. And so I have Hawaiian students in my class, and we're having these very interesting discussions on the different Hawaiian values, which are fantastic if the rest of the country would ever take a look at them, on how disagreements are resolved, and how, Hawaiians are very welcoming people, as were, I guess, a lot of Native peoples in this country, and then what happened to them over time. So that is the challenge, and Federico, I picked up on this when I was here with you in 2011 as well, is where is that next step with the cultural frame, that we have our words on paper, especially in Hawaiian too. The words, depending on who's reading them, can have a different meaning. Is an elder reading it? There's even 2 kinds of Hawaiian language. There's Old Hawaiian and the New Generation Hawaiian, and there's a lot of disputes about that. So a Hawaiian word, when I see it, I may not have the understanding that Hawaiian kupuna or an elder would have, and have to explain that to me, and do I get it? It's only through practicing some Hawaiian cultural practices that you begin to understand that. So how do we integrate that? How do we do journalism in Hawaii when everybody is related and you don't want to offend? So it's a fascinating, I want to get a Hawaiian Journalism Association going, and I've talked to some Hawaiian editors about this. So we need to have these talks. Yeah.